have some really great guests with us today. Can you introduce yourself to everybody?
Good morning, I'm Jeff Brown with Care Builders at Home.
I'm Melissa Henkelman, Care Builders at Home.
We had somebody reach out the other day, and she was in a nursing home and didn't have family involvement, didn't have anyone. So, you know, that's a different situation. What do you do? I know that our company helps people when they don't have anybody or their families. What do you guys typically do if the families aren't able to be involved?
Well, I think it depends on the client. However, you know, I've had several examples where family members were either deceased or they lived independently out of state. So the client or the patient was really by themselves. Myself, I really took it upon myself to become hyper involved. And I really oversaw the case or the cases very closely. I monitored the caregivers coming and going. I would do various pop-in visits just to make sure that that they were, you know, that they were well taken care of. I always knew that they would be from the caregiving perspective, but I think having another touch point is really critical, because eventually if they do pass, then what? You know, so that brings up a whole nother can of worms in terms of being able to set up, and some of the things that Melissa and I consult with the families on is making sure that trusts are in place. And,
Power of attorney is really important. You know, the healthcare aspect of the power of attorney is really important because, you know, we need to know who's going to make these decisions.
Right.
And so we always, as part of that education, we want to make sure that, you know, they have all their legal forms in place. Even, you know, the DNR for the hospital, because many times hospitals, they want all that information on the chart. And especially when older adults, you know, typically have readmissions, they can have all that information. So those are types of things that we do to make sure that they have a smooth process of their plan of care and moving forward, that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted. And it just, you know, we always try and look ahead just to make sure that things run smoothly, because there's always going to be things that happen that, you know, we don't have control over, but we're there to support them when those things do happen, and we can guide them, and that way they can, you know, the sandwich generation where they have their own children and they have jobs themselves, they are just so relieved when they know that they have Jeff and I to be able to, you know, put a plan in place, and they can go and live their lives and visit their loved ones when they can, but in the meantime, they're safe, they're getting their medications, nutrition. You know, a lot of people that live alone aren't getting the nutrition they need, especially if you're a diabetic. And, you know, if you have heart failure, you need to weigh yourself every morning. And sometimes they just need a caregiver to get them up on the scale to make sure, you know, that they don't trip. And so it's just those little tiny things. And there's many, many, many aspects of our job that won't even be mentioned today, but that we try and really focus in on to make sure that they're safe and living a good quality life.
You know, one of my motivations when I was considering purchasing the company was that my father was actively dying at the time. So it was about 3 years ago. And I saw the huge benefit that it can provide, especially during those moments of transition. You know, so that was one of my motivations when I actually acquired Care Builders at Home, because it's a national company that I ended up acquiring the Detroit, Southeast, Oakland County branch. So long story short, you know, I can speak from personal experience that having an involved family is just super critical.
Yeah, and it's so hard too, the guilt of if you're being really attentive to your children, then you feel like you're not helping mom and dad out enough, and if you're helping mom and dad out too much, then you're stuck feeling like you're not taking care of your children. So it's such an emotional thing. And you talked about pre-planning, you know, you're talking about power of attorney for medical. A lot of people don't know your power of attorney for your medical. I'm from the real estate world. It's different than your power of attorney for your house and your finances.
That's right.
And if you have and that's the thing where I love that you guys talk about what are your trusts, you know, what's your trust, what's your wishes, because if you don't have that plan and you're dealing with losing a loved one and then having to make those decisions of would they want to be resuscitated? Would they not?
Like a lot of children of the older adults don't feel comfortable speaking to their parents about this
Oh,
topic.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so we can sort of take that and run with it. Of course, we establish a rapport with them first. It's not like we go right in and start talking about these important issues. But once a rapport is established and they sort of have our trust and they know that we care, then they sort of tend to open up to us a little bit more. And then when the time is right, then we can, start talking about some of these really, really serious issues. And we can do that for the family.
Yep.
And, or we can guide them on how to have this conversation. And it is a really natural, easy way to just find out if, yes, they want a DNR or no, they don't. And it's okay, whatever. Now, when you have somebody that has dementia and isn't able to make their own decisions, that's a little bit different.
Right.
And that would fall upon the power of attorney, the healthcare advocate.
Right.
But it's a process that's important to be discussed, and we're there to sort of walk them through
Facilitate.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, I say this constantly. I feel like a broken record, but it's so hard. There's a million books about if you have a child, what that process looks like and how do you help them, with transitioning into different stages of life. But there's no book.
No.
We're kind of writing it about, what do you do to help? What's the process? So there's so much unknown and anticipatory anxiety that you guys being able to have those conversations
and
having the experience.
I think that just having an advocate that has been doing it, such as myself, for 34 years, from all aspects. If you look at like the aging process as a pie, there's the hospitalization, there's long-term care, there's private duty, there's all these different things that can take place. And if you have somebody that's experienced and educated, and has, I've been a caregiver, so that piece of pie that was missing for me was actually being a caregiver.
Okay.
And then I did it for 2.5 years for my mother until her eventual death in hospice. But so now I know what it's like to be a caregiver 24 hours a day, and so I can relate with these caregivers and the family members that are trying
the burnout.
and the burnout, and there's different things that come up that you just don't. I have a degree in this, and when my mom became agitated, it was really, really difficult for me to manage that.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, through now that pie is full and that experience for caregiving has been completed by myself, I think I can be like a little bit of a beacon of a light for, some of these other caregivers to you have to be creative, and I can, provide that information to make their lives a little bit easier.
Yeah, no, you guys are such a great team for that. I'm thinking about making lives easier. We're part of this huge tech boom that's going on right now. Are there some things that are happening in your industry that also kind of are part of the tech boom and life getting easier and things like that?
So we embrace technology a great deal. So in a couple of ways in the everyday life. So our caregivers are required, they use an app that they download to their phone. So it's a way for them to get an overview of that particular client. They see the ADLs or the aid to daily living that's required. Gotcha. They put their notes in. It is a customer service marketing tool that then tracks their hours that they work. So when they have to be on site, it's geo-fenced. So they have to clock in through using this app that's downloaded to their smart device. So then they clock in, they go throughout the course of their shift, they enter their ADLs, they put in notes, and then they communicate with the office, we communicate with them, and share information that way. So that's one area of technology. The second area of technology, which is exclusive for care builders, and this is what's really important about being a national chain, is that we have the access and the resources to certain things like this. And it's a whole program called our wellness program.
Okay.
And our wellness program is a partnership with a tech company on the West Coast called Cavo. And Cavo is a device. It looks similar to like a Roku device. that's hooked into people's televisions,
Okay.
which is their biggest screen of their home. The device is then hooked into their television, and then it allows for two-way communication either between my office, my team, or their family. And then what they're able to do is they're able to participate. If they're homebound, they can see their grandchildren's soccer games, and they can actually physically take part of that. But then also what it allows them to do, or allows my team to do, is to check in with them every day. So, and what it does is it helps serve that, what we call the long tail of caregiving. Somebody's really not quite ready to have a caregiver come into their home every day, because for whatever reason, it's very common. But what it does is it allows them to at least get exposure to what
it's safer.
And it's safer. So my staff would call them every morning at a specific time. We're hooked into their TV. We can see if it's 2 p.m. and they're still in their pajamas, and maybe if their apartment or their home is a little messy, we'll talk to them about their meds. And so then we can kind of start to prepare them to maybe have traditional home care.
Yeah. And what are some signs that families can look out for that, hey, maybe it's time for us to start having conversations with you? Because some people, when you're really close to it, you don't notice it because it can kind of be gradual. So
Well, you know, a lot of times, like if there's weight loss, you know, if the dentures aren't fitting like they should, that means they're losing weight. That means their diet isn't where it needs to be.
I would have known that.
Yeah. And, you know, don't forget, a lot of these people, you know, have hearing aids. If they're not, you know, putting their hearing aids in, if they're not, if they're going throughout the day without putting in their dentures, or working on their activities of daily living, such as showering, bathing, you know, brushing their teeth, getting dressed appropriately. And if they're, you know, not, you know, eating the food that they should, if their refrigerator has some spoiled produce in it, then, you know, maybe they're just, you know, if you're finding that medications are being missed, you know, if you can just tell if there's an odor, a certain odor in the house, you know, maybe they're starting to experience a little bit of incontinence. And, you know, we just want to make sure that all of their needs are being met in an appropriate fashion. Now, if, you know, there is a particular situation where you know, they're adamant about having someone come in, you know, many times those people are experiencing some dementia. So we would encourage, you know, a follow-up with their PCP or primary care physician. Maybe it's time to have, you know, if there's other things that we're noticing or the family's noticing, you know, perhaps they're starting to go out at night in their bathrobe, or, you know, trying to drive and becoming lost at the wheel, then, you know, maybe it's time to talk about seeing a neurologist and seeing what's going on in that aspect.
Well, to draft off of one of the things that Melissa said too, is one of the more challenging things that we face is that elderly people many times don't want to, you know, they don't want to sacrifice their independence or their privacy. So whenever I interview a candidate for a caregiver, I will always ask them, I'll present a situation. So I'll say, you know, if you were presented with this situation where somebody didn't want you in their home, how would you handle that? So because that's very common. So, and they, you know, they need the training and the experience to be able to, you know, to be able to handle that. And, you know, some of the care, I had one client in particular that I remember that the caregiver said, give me 2 weeks. She circled the date on his calendar and said, if you don't feel that I'm providing value for you after 2 weeks, well, they became best friends. And that's what happens.
And what happens, and this happens a lot for us, where one of the people in the home is doing well and fine and one is not doing as well. So there's almost a situation where the kids are concerned about mom who's doing all right and trying to take care of dad, but you know, dad's getting to the point where they're afraid that his care might end up hurting mom.
Yeah, we have a lot of clients like that where we're involved with the two spouses. And my biggest concern in that regard is there's a lot of times there's a lot of falls. Okay, so dad falls a lot. Okay, and so mom's trying to help him up. and then mom ends up falling herself and going to the hospital. And now who's going to take care of dad, right? So that's why it's crucial for our assessment to be able to go in there and, you know, sort of come up with a plan. And, you know, many times we have to, you know, tell the caregiver, if it's the spouse, you know, do not pick them up because you're going to get hurt yourself.
Yeah.
And once they think about that, well, who's going to take care of them? If you have to go to the hospital, then that sort of, you know, reminds them to call 911 or call us, and you know, we can sort of manage it as best as we can from that aspect.
Yeah, and sometimes people just need the permission to say, like, hey, this is what we have to do to keep everybody safe, because that, you know, that's just
Right.
not how we're raised. So that's
Well-being observation is a really critical part, you know, because in caregiving, there's a lot of what I'll call downtime. And one of the things that families need to understand is that you have somebody there that's trained, that's experienced, that's vetted, that is there to make sure that your family is safe and not, you know,
Your whole family.
so that can be a challenge too for people to say, well, you know, they're not constantly doing something. So,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
But it's peace of mind knowing
Right.
that they're there.
Right.
For sure.
Okay, so that you can go and, you know, take care of your kids, get them to their athletic events, so that you can, you know, get to work, and just to know that, you know, there's someone there that you trust and that has your parents' best interest at heart.
I know that there's a lot of things that make you guys different than other companies like yours, but what are the things being in the industry that you know, and you know that it can be kind of a saturated industry sometimes, that set you apart from these other places?
It's a good question, and I'm asked that often. I think of three things. The first is my team. The caregivers, every time I interview the caregivers, I tell them that they are the spine of my company, and they are the most important piece, because they're the front lines to
Very true.
the clients. So the better hiring standards, the better training standards, and the more pleasant workplace environment we provide, the better employees we have. So that's first and foremost, is, you know, the caregivers, the employees. The second piece is that I don't know of any other company that has somebody like Melissa on staff that is a 34-year veteran in the industry, that is willing to jump off an exercise bike and run over to a client's home to do assessments. Her experience in point of view, behavior, and attitude is really game-changing for me, and is just, you know, really critical. And then the third piece is, because we're not a small mom and pop, we're a national chain, we have a lot of resources at our avail. So there's a lot of critical training that happens, there's a lot of tools at our avail, and then there's just a lot of training that's involved from a higher level that works its way down to the individual branch offices.
Gotcha. And then obviously for you, there's some things probably that maybe Jeff doesn't always see about himself, but for you, with your experience,
Yeah.
what are some things for you coming into this that really made you feel passionate? Because I'm sure that you've had a lot of options.
Oh, thank you. You know, I just like his dedication. So, you know, over the years, 34 years to be exact, I have worked with, as a discharge planner, right? You have companies coming and begging for,
Right.
you know, for your referrals, right? And so I know a lot about all these different agencies in the community. And I keep my circle very, very small. I only like to work with who I think is the best. And I'm very serious about what I do. And I want to make sure that if I am working with another company, they have to have the same standards as I do, and the same passion to help these people. And I saw that in Jeff's company, and I can tell you, I've seen it multiple times, over and over and over again. Every time we go into a client's home, there's no rush. He's not just turning over these clients. He is truly in there with his heart and soul to make sure that their lives are that they can be living with dignity and independence and respect
Yep.
and safety, and he will do whatever it takes to make sure that when he goes home for the day that he's done everything he can to make a difference in these people's lives. And there's a lot of companies that don't do that.
Very true.
And he is trying to be really creative by, having me be involved, because he knows that I'll be an asset
Right.
to those people from an educational standpoint, from a clinical standpoint, and so we make a really, really good team, and I think I love that we're just touching so many people, one day at a time. We're just seeing who we're going to be able to help that day, and we take a lot of pride in what we do, and I think we work really well together.
Yeah, that's clear. And one of the things that I love about working with you guys is that we developed How to Help Mom to be different, to make sure that we're vetting for people and only working with companies that do have the same standards and are high quality. So you guys are just such a great example of, there are different places where you go, you put in your information, and you don't actually get the help that you need. So you guys make us stand apart in that way as well. So I'm super
Thank you.
excited that we're all working together.
Thank you.
Can you just remind everybody how we get in touch with you?
Sure.
And, the name of your company?
Right. So, Care Builders at Home, and the best way to reach me is my office is located in Southfield. Our number is 248-278-1504. My email is jbrown@carebuildersathome.com. My website, www.semicarebuildersathome.com.
Great.
And then Melissa?
Yeah, so my company's name is American Geriatric Services, and you can reach me by calling 248-917-1847. And if you are looking for an advocate to sort of help you get through this crisis with, having an older adult that's going through a medical crisis, then I'd be happy to sit down and work with you.
That's fantastic. And if you guys missed that, you can always call us and we will get you in touch with them. So, Sarah with How to Help Mom. We'll see you on the next one.